1, 2, 3, 4.
Sure, I will fade the music out.
Okay.
All right. Let me
Thanks, Liz.
stop sharing here.
Okay.
Okay. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Liz, very much. And I enjoyed the music. It was kind of from my era back in the previous millennium. Good morning to everyone for the week of soil health in Illinois, and specifically for today, which is Soil Health Day. We have had a wonderful journey preparing for this day, and we're one of the few states around the nation who are going to be honoring soil health specifically. And when I say it's been an honor to be involved in this journey, for a lot of you, the Soil Health Caucus for the Illinois Stewardship Alliance began about 18 months ago from representatives who are interested across the state of Illinois and even out of state. We got Tom down in Florida who owns farmland in Fulton County. He was on the committee. And we've got everywhere from cash grain farmers who use no-till and cover crops like myself and Dave Ramsey, to livestock producers like Ted down in Highland, to farmers who are involved in the county, collar counties around Chicago with produce production for their year-round production of various commodities through their CSAs. So we've had a great time getting together. For some of you that weren't aware on the committee, that meant 8 o'clock on Monday morning, this group got together. So you had to start your week off, start thinking about soil health. But in reality, soil health is more than just something new. It's something that we need. Our country is one of the most productive countries in the world as far as being able to produce crops, whether it's corn and soybeans, all the way down to lettuce. And we're good at it. But we've taken advantage of all what God gave us in regard to our good soils. And at this time, through soil health, which is a nationwide effort, we're beginning to rejuvenate and regenerate those soils that were so much abused somewhat by tillage. As like I said, cash grain farmer, corn and soybeans practically all my life, a little bit of wheat. Over the years, I began to realize that if I had wheat in the rotation, if the price was right, I could actually raise better corn than if I had corn after soybeans. Then I realized that the diversity to my rotation was what it was about. I started no-tilling to control erosion, but then I started realizing all the middens I had from the earthworms. Little did I realize that I was actually increasing my population of fungi, bacteria, protozoa, nematodes, all the good things underneath the soil that we only didn't think about for all those years. And as a long-term college teacher of agriculture, I've mentioned very little about soil health. To me, it's been something that's begun in just the last 10 years. Today, we've got look forward to really an exciting day. We've got a lot of people involved. One of the persons that's most involved in my household in soil health is my wife. My wife was a long-term researcher at the medical school, and I show you this picture because she cut out this article out of the Time magazine relating to the relationship between the soil biome and the biome in our own human gut. So we've got all these things happening out there. We can go to look at soil health through a Haney test, or we could go to a Cornell test. And those became popular with the corn growers and their work this past 5 or 6 years. So we've got a lot of good things going with a lot of good people. And today we're honoring that work of others and for the others in the future who are going to make this possible for us here in Illinois. But our lineup today, I think you're going to be excited about that if you haven't already looked at the agenda. But we've got coming both national employees from NRCS, in this case, our local soil conservationist, Ivan Dozier, located in Champaign, will be with us later. Stacy Zuber, an Illinois girl that went out of state to get her education, some of it, but from Olney, Illinois. And she's our soil health specialist. And that's particularly important to realize, is that those lighter organic matter soils really need some of the practices that we adhere to in soil health as far as improvement. We've got also lined up people from the DNR. I just spoke with Mike Chandler, whom I've been a longtime friend with, who's going to be with us today. Also, we've got a young man that I just recently met this past year who I really admire his thinking and the way he can speak, and that's Max Webster from the Farmland Trust, American Farmland Trust, excuse me, AFT. So that's just a sampling of what we have coming for you today in the Soil Health Summit that's being really emphasizing Soil Health Day here in Illinois. It's my pleasure to say thank you for attending and being involved from the Illinois Stewardship Alliance. I'm Dick Lyons, and I'm with the Stewardship Alliance, and I really believe that we can and make a difference in the future for the health of our soils here in Illinois. One of the things that our Alliance Caucus did, we wanted to have the resolution for Soil Health Week and Day, and we discussed it. One of the members on the caucus was Becky Doyle, our former Director of Agriculture. Becky and I are long-term friends. We don't necessarily be on the same side of the fence politically, but we sure can straddle the fence together for soil health. And so we wanted to get representatives and senators from Illinois, from both sides of the aisle, to support our resolution. So it's my pleasure now to introduce a gentleman, our representative, Charles Meyer, commonly known as Charlie by his friends, and I hope to be able to call him Charlie someday. He's from the 108th District in Southern Illinois. What brings Charles to us today that's so important, he lives on the family farm, a centennial farm down in Washington County. Back in the last decade, his family was actually named the Conservation Family of the Year here in Illinois. So we've got someone that can really relate to what we're talking about. Representative Meyer, it's a pleasure to introduce you. Take it from here.
Good morning. Apologize about the background and the way I look. I've had a bad fall and I have a cast from my butt to my foot. So I'm in comfortable clothes with a pocket so I can keep my phone in case I fall down and call for help. So that's the way we're doing this Zoom meeting today, not a normal way, but I'm happy to be here today. I've been a state rep for 10 years. I was on the Heartland Conservancy board back even when it was the Great Southwestern Illinois Soil and Water District. So I had 14 years in with that. I've worked hard this entire time trying just to get the money that would have helped with the Kaskaskia watershed. There was $20 million there of federal money earmarked that we were never able to get because Republicans and Democrats alike in this state don't see the importance in our environment and helping fix it. And the state of Illinois would have had to put up $2 million to get 20 million to help with 12% of the land mass in the state of Illinois. And neither party's administrations, while the governor, would allocate that money. We had we ended up shy of 300,000 to bring 20 million in to work on that. So we've got a long way to go with educating our politicians. And I'm always best to be called Charlie. And there's nothing fancy about me. We still farm 1,600 acres. We have livestock on the farm yet. I was an old dairy farmer for the first part of my life. That's all I ever wanted to do. My mother's illness for 8 years, we had to sell the cows to keep her here on the farm till the day she died. And after that's when I've got involved in politics. So I'm happy to go out there and work. From the time I was able just to tag along behind my father, my nose and fingers would be down in the dirt, and we have responsibilities. We have the responsibility that we are the nation that continually feeds the world in times of trouble. The growing world population, we have to keep increasing our production, but we have the responsibility of protecting our environment and building our soils back. I'm old enough that I remember going out there at the moldboard plow and flipping the soil over. And if you got a big rain, you lost massive amounts of your soil and erosion. My friends that are 10, 15 years younger than me don't even know how to moldboard plow anymore. And so, we continue to change, we continue to build. I read somewhere earlier this fall about a program that was called the undie test, that you bury a pair of white cotton underwear in the ground, and if they rot in 3 months, it's a way of showing you've got good healthy soil. There's a lot of new concepts coming on what to do, how to lock up our nitrates, and how we can use less fertilizer, the technology that we're getting with farming, the way we do the split application helps with that. No farmer wants to spend more on fertilizer or fungicide or anything else than what we need. So as we learn to work together and keep using the newest practices, we can make a difference in the state of Illinois. So, hopefully we can. It seems like every year we're still increasing yields, but we are paying a lot more attention to our soils and waters. As a kid, I remember after big rains going and watching you'd see dead fish floating down the creek. We didn't have any mussels in our creek anymore, and we have them back there now. So we are making improvements. In the ag world, we would much rather do it voluntarily than going out and having a law saying this is exactly what you're going to do. We want to go out, experiment a little bit on our own, see what works on every farm's a little different, see what we can work with and how we're going to get forward with that. And this alliance is greatly helping us with that. And we just need to keep working together towards it. If anybody wants to ask me a question on how things work in Springfield, I'd be happy to do that. But I didn't know how long you just wanted me to talk today. I have another Zoom meeting to get onto, but hopefully that's going well.
Yes, no, thank you, Representative Meyer, or Charlie, I should say. We really appreciate you for taking the time. I'm really sorry to hear about the fall, and thank you so much for still getting on and being with us and sharing that message. I think you did an excellent job and you covered all the topics. If there is any questions, I'm happy to read those in the chat, or I'm happy to pass it over to Senator Scott Bennett. He is also with us this morning, and he is championing the soil health resolution in the Senate. And he has been a champion for us on many of our local food and soil health bills, worked with partners. Every time we call Representative Charlie Meyer or Senator Scott Bennett, they always answer.
Well, thank you, Liz. That makes me feel good. And Charlie, I hope you have a quick recovery. I'd heard in the Capitol about your fall. But goodness knows we need you back in the Capitol these last 5 weeks going through the end of session. So I'm Scott Bennett. I'm a senator from the Champaign area. Charlie and I are different political parties. We're different chambers, but I think a good example, we work on a lot of these bills together. And as Liz said, I think another just a good illustration of how this is not a partisan issue. We all have a role to play in good soil health. So I just wanted to welcome everybody to the summit. I think this is a great opportunity to raise awareness. I've been really happy, and I also represent Danville, and I know some of the radio stations there have reached out about the resolution, and I think it's a terrific opportunity to talk about it and let people really reflect on. I mean, we know it, but I think you need to kind of reflect on how good soil health has a direct bearing on the quality of the food and drinking water that we need to survive. I am the sponsor of the Senate Joint Resolution 44, which I'm looking as looking at it as an opportunity, I think, to bring advocates from all over the spectrum together, to not just to celebrate soil health, but to educate, raise awareness as to how soil health just makes good sense from a human health aspect, and environmental aspect, and even an economic aspect. So on every box is checked when we pay attention to our soil health. I drove this morning, as I always do, as almost every legislator does, through a couple hours of fields to get to Springfield today. But I don't know how much the legislators, for example, really reflect on what they're driving past. And my family, Charlie, I think he has a longer history than I do, but my family's farmed since the 1860s in around Champaign. And we go to a lot of land sales only to get outbid by the Charlie Myers of the world, of course, the real big farmers. Sorry, Charlie. But, there's an expression, they're not making any more of it. And that's, one of the arguments for why land prices are so high, because as urban areas expand, we get less and less farmland, but we're asking it to provide for more and more sustenance for a growing population. I think if you ask most farmers in my family or in my district, they would say they're good stewards of the land. And I think they try to be, but I also don't think that everybody has been taught good practices. You can see, I remember I was probably 35 years ago watching, I think it was a PBS show about runoff in central Illinois, and all the nutrients that are being taken out the fields and swept into waterways just because of some bad practices. Now, technology improves, practices improve, but I would think that, if you ask or if you studies, many of those runoff issues would be as true today or nearly as true today as they were 30 years ago. So let's try to educate people. Let's try to get people to a place where we can not be saying, my kids won't be saying this 30 years from now. They'll recognize what we did to protect the soil health. And I think Soil Health Day and Week is a great way to get people to start paying attention. And with that, I think I'll introduce, I think he's on, my constituent and the next speaker, who's the Illinois NRCS Conservation List, Ivan Dozier. And so is Ivan on?
I am here, Senator Bennett.
Hi, Mr. Dozier. Thanks for being on. Have a good summit, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Yes, thank you, Senator Bennett, and thank you, Liz. I am Ivan Dozier. I'm the state conservationist with USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service. I do want to thank you all for the opportunity to join you here to celebrate Soil Health Day, Soil Health Week, and certainly thank those legislative sponsors that we have. It's just great to be involved with this effort. Anything that puts more focus and attention on our precious soil resources, we really appreciate it. Agriculture, it's just such a key component to Illinois. And I'm sure many of you are aware of some of the previous bills and resolutions that we've had that are designed to remind us and showcase the important issues of agriculture and farmers' impact in Illinois. Just a few of those that were important to me. You might remember some of these, but we celebrated the Illinois Collaborative Soil Survey Partnership back in 1995. It was in 2001 that we had our Illinois State Soil Drummer declared, and still fantastic. It's great to hear that school kids can be a part of that. We established Illinois Conservation Day in 2005, and we recognized the International Year of the Soils in 2015. So this is going to go right up there with those momentous events for me, because there is a need, there is a value in keeping these concepts, these ideas in the spotlight to ensure that this importance is never overlooked or overshadowed. You probably know the agency I work for. It was formed back in 1935. That's a long time ago, back in those Dust Bowl days when they were ravaging our country's farms. sometimes when I look in the mirror, I think I look like I was around back then. Dick, you were talking about that, how long we've been around for a while, but back then I wasn't there. We were first known as the Soil Erosion Service. Then we changed to the Soil Conservation Service, but it was soil. That was the heart of what was important to our nation's future. Soil, and then and now it's precious. It's precious to agriculture and to farmers. And even when our name was changed to Natural Resources Conservation Service to reflect that broader range of resource concerns, soil still stays at the forefront. When we talk about those natural resources, our acronym is SWAPA. It's soil, water, air, plants, and animals. So we still keep soil first. And it's one of the reasons, that I've worked for SCS and NRCS for so long. It is because I'm proud to be part of that fight to protect and build up our soil resources. Dick was talking about this too, a long time ago. Maybe we didn't use the same terminology over the last 85 years. We weren't using some of today's buzzwords like climate change or carbon management. But what we focused on were efforts like what the Soil Health Summit prioritizes and promotes. It's something that USDA and the government, both federal and local, we've worked hard to protect. And that's soil, it's water, it's conservation. These are the same issues that have resulted in the formation of our local soil and water conservation districts across the country, and many of the partners and environmental groups that are involved here today. Let me clarify something though. The government, national or state, organizations, that's not where conservation truly happens. Yeah, we can help. We can organize and coordinate things like we're doing today, offer technical expertise, guidance, even financial support to do the right thing. But where it really happens, where climate smart farming really happens, it's on the farm fields that are all across the landscape. Whether you've got a farm that does cover thousands of flat acres in central Illinois, a small dairy farm on steep unglaciated slopes in northwestern Illinois, or on our older weathered soils down south that I'm more used to. That's where the real decisions that impact soil are made, and they're made every day. Whether it's no-till, strip-till, cover crops, or one of the hundreds of different conservation practices farmers can use to change their tactics and build up the soil instead of using them up. Many Illinois farmers are making the changes to build their soil, and they're doing a great job, but there's still too many farmers who haven't yet made the adjustments to adopt broad-scale soil health practices. My hope and my message here today is that with things like this effort, the great partners and events like this, that it'll plant like a plant in a healthy soil, take root, push this soil health movement even more. And I think we need to engage all of our farmers, all of our landowners, operators, absentee landowners, everyone who's out there. There are still a few that are plowing up the planet's best and most productive soils. So I just want to say, let's make conservation the way to grow food and fiber in Illinois. Make it the only way, the best way. And let's have Illinois be a leader in this effort. Let's farm for a stable future and for tomorrow's natural resource base. So thanks again for what you're doing. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the rest of the week. Thanks so much for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you so much, Ivan. We really appreciate your time and your words to help us lift us up on this really special Soil Health Day, the first of its kind, but hopefully not the last of its kind. We are really looking forward to continuing to working with you and other partners to pass this resolution and come back next year with a bill so we can make this a yearly event and continue to grow it so we can attract more folks to continue to build soil health. All right. Well, Ivan, thank you so much. I know you have a meeting starting in a few minutes, so I'll let you scoot away. But again, I really appreciate it. I'll see you at the State Technical Committee meeting. See you later. All right. Well, again, thank you to Ivan Dozier, Senator Scott Bennett, and Representative Charlie Meyer for opening up with some wonderful words, and to Dick Lyons, Lyons Family Farm, and our Soil Health Caucus member, for leading the charge this morning and really grounding us in an awesome Soil Health Day. Like Dick mentioned, we have a lot of wonderful speakers for you this afternoon, and we will go all the way up until about lunchtime, and we'll let you have a break, and then we are going to hear from Peter Lenner, who is the author of Farming for Our Future, the Science, Law, and Policy of Climate Neutral Agriculture. So we have a jam-packed morning and afternoon, and I just want you to know that whenever you need to take a break, take a break. We just go away and use the bathroom or go get a snack when you need it. We'll be right here waiting for you, but we will have a break at about noon. And just one quick change about our schedule. Unfortunately, Bill Schleiser, President and CEO of Delta Institute, cannot make it with us today. He is under the weather, but our agenda is going to stay pretty on course. We might just have a tad bit longer break, or just more chances to connect and network with each other during the listening session portion, which is at the latter half of this event. But without further ado, I will introduce Stacy Zuber. She is our Illinois soil health specialist. And like Dick mentioned, Stacy grew up here in Southeast Illinois. She has an ag background, and she has a master's and doctorate degrees in sciences from the University of Illinois. She has researched soil and everything about the soil microbiome from start to finish. And we are very excited to have you with us today, Stacy, to kind of give us a statewide glimpse of what's going on in the soil health world from your perspective as our soil health specialist. So I am going to remove myself here, and I'll let you take it away, Stacy. If you need any help with sharing your screen, just let me know.
All right, thank you, Liz, so much for that introduction. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And is it up?
Yes, it looks great, and your sound is wonderful too.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so good morning to everyone. I'm so happy to be here to be able to talk to you about soil health in Illinois. As Liz mentioned, I got my master's and PhD. I did those here in Illinois. I'm from Illinois, but I did go out of state to get to do some extra research, some on-farm cover crop and soil health research, and I was in Indiana and Missouri. And then, you know, I got the opportunity. Illinois NRCS created the soil health specialist position. There previously wasn't a soil health specialist in the state before June of 2020, and that's when I came on, and I was really excited to be able to come back to Illinois. Working in some of the surrounding states, there's a lot of bragging that happens in those states about what they've done with soil health, with cover crops, and I was really excited to be able to come back to Illinois and try to move us forward so we can try to start catching up with those other states. So just as what I'm going to talk about today is kind of that background of where we are and where we can go, some opportunities to move forward, and some of the unique challenges that we face here in Illinois that they don't face in those states that I've gotten to work in. So just as a start, I want to start with the definition of soil health. So this is a definition that you all should be familiar with, hopefully, at this point, but I always like to start out with that so we make sure we're all on the same page. So when we're talking about soil health, it's the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. And the parts of this definition that I think are the most important and the most vital are the word function. We're talking about the processes, the functions that are happening within the soil that give us the benefit, that help make our soils as productive as they possibly can be. And that is through this vital living ecosystem component. It's the biology within the soil that's really driving those processes and those functions. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting them and we're giving them a habitat and environment that helps them thrive and helps them grow and helps them support our agriculture and our crops that are growing in those soils. So when we're talking about soil health, the soil health principles, again, you've probably seen this before. We have these minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover. And those are really all about protecting the soil structure and the organic matter within those. So we're all about making sure that we have these aggregates, and we'll talk more about aggregates later in this presentation, but protecting the aggregates and the structure of the soil and the organic matter that's there. And then on top of that, if we can feed the biology, if we give it a diverse smorgasbord of food, different types of exudates and different types of residues from different types of crops and cover crops, that can help feed them, make that biology more diverse, make it be able to do those processes faster and better, and give us more productive soils. And then that goes back, if we're already protecting their habitat because we're protecting those organic, that organic matter, those soil aggregates, it just continues to grow, and we get this positive feedback loop where we get better and better soils over time. So I kind of talked about this already, but why soil health is so important is because of those functions that it gives us. When we can really protect the soil, when we can build that soil organic matter, when we can build a thriving soil microbial community that's really driving those processes and functions. So we can build that soil organic matter and the carbon. I know that's a huge topic for a lot of people when we're talking about climate smart agriculture and the potential for carbon markets. But I don't want to stop there. There's so much more, because we can get increased nutrient cycling. We can get potentially disease suppression, where we actually have a biological community within the soil that can help protect our crops from pathogens and provide support to them. So we're not relying on chemicals entirely for disease suppression. Building those soil aggregates, I'll talk about this more, but I think this one, the soil aggregates, is maybe underlooked, but that's one of the most important benefits that we can get from building a habitat and environment that's conducive for that soil biology. When we're building that soil health, the soil aggregates give us so much, and that's something we should talk about more. And part of that is that improved infiltration, and then potentially improved trafficability. If we have those soil structures developed, if we have those aggregates, we can really get out onto our fields, be able to do our operations on those fields a little earlier after any kind of heavy rainfall. And that can make a huge difference in busy years when we have some of these farms that have huge acreage. That's a big benefit that they can get from this. So we have all of these potential benefits from the soil health. On top of that, if we're using things like no-till, if we're using things like cover crops, we can get the soil health building there while also be able to reduce our loss of nutrients. So I don't even have that on this slide, but I think that's another important component of this. Something that we've been really focused on in Illinois is reducing nutrient loss, keeping that nitrogen, that phosphorus in our fields, rather than allowing them to go into the water, into our rivers, our streams, and making it into the Gulf of Mexico. So, if we can do that, we can reduce our nutrient loss while also building the soil health and getting all of these benefits from it. That's a win-win. So that's one of the things I think is so important about soil health, is we can do that. So, I just have a couple here slides of the basic tools that we have in our toolbox for building soil health: reduced tillage, no-till. Those really check 4 or 3 of those boxes that we said for the soil health principles, by minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing biodiversity. And we may not think of, oh, I'm doing no-till, so I'm increasing the biodiversity. But if you do no-till, you're disturbing the soil less. You're not interfering with that soil biology. So over time, it becomes a better and better habitat for the soil microbes, for organisms in the soil, the fungi in particular. And so we actually do start seeing more diverse microbial communities under no-till fields, under fields with less disturbance, because it's a better habitat for them. With our cover crops, and actually a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is cover crops, and sometimes this is associated as the only thing we do for soil health. It's not. It needs to come together with reduced tillage, with other things as well, but it is one that checks 3 of those boxes as well. Getting that soil cover, maximizing the continuous living roots, so we have food for those soil organisms all of the year, and giving them a diverse pool of food, where we're giving them more than just corn and soybean. We're giving them other types of exudates, other types of residues, and that's really important for that soil biology. And then the next step with this, and something that, we're probably lagging behind a little bit in Illinois, just because we are such a corn and soybean based agricultural system. Our infrastructure is built for that. We moved away from livestock, over the years, but that's another way, if we can incorporate that back in, integrating livestock in these systems, whether that's by grazing cover crops, or other ways of doing that with pasture and things like that. That's another way to kind of level up our soil health. And so talking about levels, when we have these, different soil health principles that we're doing, we can see these changes. Sometimes they are going to be fairly slow. And we see that if we're just doing the basics of these soil health principles, but we can make them go faster if we, kind of go up to the next step where we're doing more living roots, more biodiversity, more soil cover, and less disturbance. And so one of the things with this, when we're talking to farmers, when we're trying to get people convinced to do soil health, they certainly should start small, start slow, but they shouldn't get discouraged if they're not seeing huge changes in a short period of time. It takes time for us to see these changes. And if they really want to see them faster, they want to see bigger changes in their soil health, that's where they're going to have to go to the next level. So for instance, with cover crops, if they're just doing a winter killed cover crop, that's often what we recommend to start with, doing an oat radish mix. That is a great place to start. But it's going to take time to see the changes in their soil health from that, because you're not getting as much biomass. It's not overwintering. So if we want to do a little more, hopefully they get comfortable with the idea of cover crops. They're able to manage them. They're not as scary after they've done it a year or two. And then they can go to an overwintering single species, something like cereal rye maybe. And then eventually, hopefully, we can get a multi-species mix in there, giving more diversity in the plants there. That gives more diversity in the microbial community within the soil. So all of these are kind of the basic ideas behind soil health, the ideas that we really want to make sure and communicate to farmers, to producers, because I think there's so much importance to these. So moving on from these basics of soil health, let's talk about where we are in Illinois. So what really is the state of soil health in Illinois? So I have some numbers that I pulled from a couple different ag census and a couple different resources and places, just to kind of get an idea of where are we. And I'm going to focus on cover crops, because the no-till, most farmers who are going to do no-till, that's kind of been in progress since the 70s. A lot of people are doing, no-till soybeans. It's pretty well established, the people that are going to do that. But cover crops is the place where we can see the most movement, and it can make a huge impact, both from a nutrient loss perspective as well as that soil health. So that's why I'm focusing on the cover crops for most of the rest of this. But from the ag census, so we had the 2012 ag census, Illinois had about 319,000 acres of cover crops in that ag census. That, doubled almost in 2017. We're at 708,000 acres. So we do have, the ag census was just done for the next 5-year time, but we don't have those results quite yet. But hopefully we're seeing a continued increase in that over time. And we can see that in some of the other surveys that have been done. So this is the USDA NASS also helped with the nutrient loss reduction strategy survey in Illinois, where we did a survey with over 1,000 farmers across the state. And so this, you can see in 2011, reporting around 600,000 acres. 2015, that went up to 1.1 million acres. We had a drop in 2017, according to this survey. Maybe that's a weather-related thing. That makes a huge difference in this and whether farmers are able to, establish those cover crops, do them consistently. But then back in 2019, we're up to 1.4 million. So that's, a great sign. We are improving. We are getting more cover crop adoption across the state. So we do have some other numbers, so those are from the last year on that was 2019. So where are we, in 2022? Well, some of our best estimates for that are coming from the different financial assistance programs, whether that's from the Illinois Department of Agriculture, where there's an incentive pay for, the fall covers for spring savings with that premium discount on the crop insurance, and that for 2021 we, have over 170,000 acres. Cost share, I think I was supposed to have that as 200,000 acres because together we were supposed to have a 217,000 acres, but we have a huge number of acres coming through the state programs, through the State Department of Agriculture. This is from NRCS, from the EQIP program. The amount of applied acreage for just the cover crop standard across the state, and we see, we have those, they're relatively steady. There is some increase from 2019 and 2021. The 2022 numbers, these are ones, they're not quite applied, but these are what we have in the system for being planned. So hopefully we see all of those in place where we're, around 15 to 16,000 acres going through that. And the EQIP program, we actually have quite a bit more in the CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program in Illinois. And we see a pretty large increase in that from 2019 to 2022, where we're starting out with around 14,000 acres to over 117,000 acres in 2022 that are planned. So we have a huge increase in the CSP. So obviously using these as our reference are just capturing the cover crops that are being applied through these financial assistance programs and cost share programs. There's probably plenty more of farmers who are doing this on their own, are trying it on small acres. Maybe they don't want to go into doing these programs yet, but these are give us a good idea of the progress that we're making for cover crop adoption across the state. So our acreage is continuing to increase, but the key thing with this is we have a lot more room to go. So I think at most we're at 1.5 million acres of cover crops, and that might be an optimistic estimate there for sure. But and that's out of over 22 million acres that are being used to grow corn and soybean in this state. So we have a lot more room to go. We have a lot of improvement that we can make in the adoption of cover crops across the state. And one of the things with this, I said before, we face some unique challenges here in Illinois that maybe Indiana, Missouri, even Iowa don't face. And so I want to go into a little bit of those. What are the things that make our soils in Illinois different? What are the things that make the adoption of cover crops and other soil health practices in Illinois a little more challenging? So we really need to acknowledge this. So the first one I want to start with is talking about rented land. So Illinois has the highest proportion of rented land in the country for agriculture. Midwest rates of rented land are much higher than the rest of the country, and Illinois is the highest. We have around 60% of all of our acreage in the state, our cropland acreage, that is rented. Iowa is at 54%, I believe. So they're fairly close behind, but we're still, the highest rate of rented land in the country. And that's a challenge for us for getting soil health on the ground, for getting cover crops, for getting no-till and other things, because these practices build over time. We know that you don't get the benefits immediately. It takes time to see those. And so that's a challenge for convincing farmers to adopt this on their rented land, because those leases are often year to year, they're annual leases, and often verbal. So we're not even getting them written down. There's been some work about developing these a conservation addendum that they can add to leases, but if they're a verbal lease, that's changing the entire way that they're doing that. So it is a challenge for us to try to get more cover crops and more no-till and more soil health practices on the ground, because it's just difficult for farmers to find this as a practical option. It's a risk for them to take that. The landowners are not always going to be a fan of it. And even if they are, they may not be able to really reap those rewards because they aren't guaranteed that they're going to be on that same land in 5 years when those benefits are really showing up and becoming really clear. So it's a challenge to convince farmers to do this. And we really need to acknowledge that as a challenge and a way to work around it. So one of the ways, we can do that is reaching out to non-operating landowners, all of our landowners in this, and convince them, the priority that they need to do to protect their land, protect their resource, because that's something for down the road. If they're going to hold on to this land, they're going to rent it out in the future. Hopefully, if they're doing this, they're protecting it, getting the environmental benefits, but also making that land more productive and better for farmers who are going to be renting that land in the future. So getting them to communicate with their tenants, getting a communication back and forth, and helping them to develop that. And there's some work that's being done on this from a lot of different groups who are really trying to reach out to landowners, reach out and talk to the farmers themselves about how do we talk about this, how do we communicate, and opening those channels of communication. So that's, one of the challenges that we have, but it's an opportunity for us going forward. So another major challenge, and I think this got mentioned before, we have, very different soils depending on which part of the state that you're in, and that can make a huge difference as to how open a farmer is to doing a soil health management practice, how open they are to adopting cover crops, because it's a risk benefit analysis that all of these farmers are doing. And for a lot of the farmers on the soils, we have, these highly productive mollisols that we have in right here, this part of the state and over into the western part of the state. These are our mollisols that are the soils with the very high organic matter, are black soils that were developed under prairie vegetation. They're younger soils, and they are highly productive. And we know that, and they're often most of them are very flat as well. So it is a challenge to convince a farmer that the benefits that they can get from applying cover crops on their field are going to outweigh any risks that they're taking, because it is more challenging for them to see and grasp what benefits they can get from doing cover crops, from improving their soil health. Because of that high organic matter, they are starting out at a higher level. It's just a basic fact. They're starting out at a higher level, but that doesn't mean that they can't improve further. So one of the things we do need to acknowledge is in Southern Illinois and in parts of the western part of the state, we do have those alpha soils, those older soils that were developed on forest vegetation or transition vegetation. Those soils are going to be slightly lower in organic matter. They're going to have, in some cases down here, we have clay pans and other issues that come up that they're not as productive inherently. They're going to get lower yields. So farmers are much more receptive to the idea of cover crops, of soil health. They're much more willing to listen and say, all right, what can I do to improve my soils? Because this is the best way to do that. And they know they're starting out kind of behind. So those soil types make a huge difference. And here we have, this is from the ag census, the 2017 ag census, of where we have the highest adoption of cover crops across the state. And we do see higher adoption in the southern part of the state, the western part of the state. And it is really, it's pretty impressive how clearly this graph or this map matches up with where those mollisols are the highest concentration in the state, where we're seeing they're just lower adoption of cover crops there. And that's because they have that in the southern part of the state, the western part of the state, they're going to have the lower inherent organic matter. There's typically more slope, more topography. So they're going to, want cover crops, be more willing to do cover crops from the erosion perspective. So what can we do about this? We still want to make sure that we're getting cover crops as much as possible, because those soils still need to be protected. They can be improved. So my focus on this, and this is the thing that I think I've talked to a lot of people about when we're talking about these soils in central and somewhat in northern Illinois, these high organic matter soils, we don't want to be talking about organic matter, because that's not of interest to them, really, because they already have that high organic matter. Adding more, it's going to take time. It is a slow process when you already have fairly high organic matter. So that's maybe going to take more time than they might even realize to see those changes in that organic matter. But that doesn't mean they can't get many, many other soil health benefits. And that's why I like to talk about aggregate stability. When we're talking about aggregate stability in these soils, we get the benefits regardless of where you are in the state, what kind of soils you're on. You typically see the changes in aggregate stability much faster. You see that in 1 to 2, maybe even at most 3 years that we're seeing those improvements on those soils from an aggregate stability perspective. It may take more like 4 5, 7 years or 10 years to see those changes in the organic matter. So I think we need to really focus on aggregate stability and not talk as much about organic matter. I know a lot of farmers want to right now because of the carbon markets, and that's great if they're interested because of that. But I think we should focus on the aggregate stability as, you know, the quicker change, the benefit they're going to get up front. They're going to see this benefit much faster. And then the carbon change, they might get that. That's a side benefit, you know, because they've already got this aggregate stability change and benefit from that. And so when we're talking about aggregate stability, if you're not as familiar with this term, what we're really looking at is how the aggregates, the different soil particles, our sand, silt, and clay, are glued together into these larger particles, the aggregates. And we want a soil that looks like this on the left and looks like this here, where we have those individual particles, they're grouped together, they're glued together into these aggregates, and that leaves open pore spaces between them, and that allows water and air movement into the soil. And that's what we need for that soil biology. We need those microbes to have water and oxygen in order to live and thrive and do their job for us. So if we don't have that, if we don't have a well aggregated soil, if we're disturbing the soil and breaking these aggregates, if we're not feeding the biology within the soil, we can get these poorly aggregated soils. They basically just become like a brick and become a solid block almost within the soil. And on the soil surface, you get all these individual particles just kind of cemented together into a layer. And then that becomes problematic for water into our soils. It cannot move in. It's blocked off. We also don't have air moving in and out. So that's problematic from our soil biology, because then we get anaerobic conditions. So this is a real issue if we want to kind of prevent this as much as possible. If we can get those soil health benefits, we get the soil health practices on the ground, we see these improvements in the aggregation relatively quickly. And that's because if we get those there, we can feed the biology, and it's the biology that's creating these aggregates. It's the microbes, our bacteria, our fungi that are releasing chemicals or using their hyphae and filaments to glue these different individual particles together. So that's why protecting the biology or protecting the soil structure is important, but we also need to feed the biology, because then that increases our soil structure, increases our aggregates, and we get that positive feedback loop between those. So poor aggregation, I showed this, that little picture before, but if you have poor aggregation, you get surface crusting, because all of those individual particles kind of glue together on the soil surface. That can lead to ponding if you have any low spots in your field. It also leads to erosion and runoff and erosion. So, we want to prevent these as much as we possibly can, because if we have that poor aggregation, we're not getting the benefits. And so because it's really organic matter that's gluing those aggregates together, it's from the microbes, when they're enclosed within those aggregates, they are protected. They're not going to be eaten. So this is really the important part. If you're going to be building organic matter and you want to get building the carbon, sequestering carbon within your soils, we have to protect what's there. So then we can continue to build more and continue to protect that. If you are not protecting that soil organic matter from the beginning, you can't build more. You can't build on top of that. We get better water infiltration from these aggregates. We get a greater resistance to erosion. So those individual particles aren't going to come loose as easily with wind or water. So we have a greater resistance to erosion. And then we also, because those aggregates, the pore spaces are there, they're allowing water to move into the soil. They also stay, pretty intact when they have pressure on top of them. That reduces our risk of compaction. And from a trafficability perspective, that's really important. If we want to be able to go out in our fields, be able to do our operations on the field relatively quickly after any kind of rain event, we need to have those aggregates in place. So I think this is one of those benefits, the aggregate stability, that gives us so many additional benefits on top of that. It's not one single thing, it's all of these together. And the important thing for this is, even if you have high organic matter, you may not have good aggregate stability. If you are tilling the soils, if you are disturbing the soils, if you are not feeding the biology, you may not be getting all of the benefits that you could from that. So that's why I think why I really want to focus on soil aggregate stability as the key thing for us to talk about in Illinois for soil health. It's so important from so many different levels on this. So we have some unique challenges within the state, but we have a lot of opportunities too. And I really wanted to go into more detail, but time limits, I didn't want to spend too much time talking about so many different things. I could have spent quite a bit longer, but I wanted to keep it a little short because I do think it's a really exciting time for soil health in Illinois. We have a lot of opportunities to make changes, to get the message out there. And I'm really excited about the farmers who are excited about soil health as well. There's a lot of conversation about this. We have so many different amazing partners and organizations across the state working on soil health. So I'm very excited. So thank you so much for your time. I'm very happy to be here to talk about this. And if we have time, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you so much. Yes, I don't see any in the chat, but if there are some folks out there that would maybe like to raise their Zoom hand, we can definitely get to some questions here. Oh, I think I just saw one pop in the chat. So from Nathan Ryder, does NRCS have programs specifically looking at the aggregate makeup of your farm soils?
So we do have as part of a fairly new soil health testing activity, the aggregate stability is a part of that. But in general, it is a relatively new resource concern for NRCS that previously we didn't really have aggregate stability as a main resource concern for soil health. Previously, it was compaction and soil organic matter. So we do have that were just added in the last couple of years, the aggregate instability. So really focusing on aggregates, and then also the soil organism habitat. So those are the key ways that we're kind of addressing those now that weren't previously being addressed with our programs, really changing that focus and opening it up more for the biology and that habitat for the biology within the soil. So that's really kind of the key change that we have in NRCS for that.
Interesting. Okay, awesome. No, and I really appreciate just how you've kind of taken us through just our current system and the challenges, but you also explained some of the ways that we can overcome those barriers. That's what I definitely took away from your presentation. And a couple more questions coming in. What is the best way to feed, in all capital letters, the microbes in the soil, from Ron?
All right, so for that, basically just giving them as much food as we can. So that's that continuous living roots component. If we want to make sure that we're giving them food as much of the year as possible, and what they're eating, a lot of what they're eating is the exudates, these chemicals that the plants release. And so they can get those from our cash crops, but they also can get those from our cover crops. So we want to make sure that we're giving them those as much of the year as possible. So we're minimizing the part of the year that they don't have that food source. And then on top of that, the diverse component is giving them as much diversity in their food as we can. So not just the corn, not just the soybean. We want to give them, different types of residues, different types of food from our cover crops, and making, whether that's, we can get that by having a more diverse crop rotation, having maybe small grains within our crop rotation. That's not going to be very practical for most farmers. Hopefully we can, that's another opportunity that I didn't get a chance to go into, that maybe we can do work with that. And there's a lot of work from different on the food industry side, trying to, push regenerative agriculture. And that's an opportunity for that, and developing more infrastructure for small grains to incorporate that into these rotation, so we're not stuck with just corn and soybean. But then the cover crops are another way, and that's maybe an easier way for most farmers to incorporate that, to give it more diversity in the exudates and in the food that we're feeding those microbes.
Definitely, I completely agree. And our local food folks are we believe Illinois can feed Illinois. There's definitely a lot happening in the local food space and diversification of our crop rotations. And I'm really excited to see some of the progress in the future, from agroforestry all the way to, just like you said, our small grains production. I think there's definitely some promise and really great things already happening. Bob asks, what does NRCS Illinois need to maximize the delivery of this technical assistance in urban areas?
So I think we're doing a lot in Illinois. There is a more focus on getting the message out there in urban areas about a lot of different practices, particularly soil health. That's something I think we need to, have the bigger conversations with the different organizations, looking at urban areas, looking at soil health and how to deliver that message in there. I know Illinois is going to have a more focus in the future in the NRCS of Chicago area in particular, delivering more of that message of urban agriculture and soil health in there.
Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, I'm really excited for the subcommittee for urban ag to get started over with NRCS. Let's see, I have another question here in the chat. If you can answer this, is anyone, or do you have an idea of how many farmers are doing relay cropping in Illinois to add diversity?
I'm not really aware of too many doing that. I'm sure there's some, but it's not really probably something we see as much here. So it's not something I've worked with as much. I don't have a great answer for how much of that is happening here, but I don't think it's very much.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone out there that would want to raise their Zoom hand? You can go down to your reactions button at the bottom of your toolbar there, and I can call on you if you do have any other questions for Stacy, or type away in the chat and I will get to it.
I do see another one in the chat here about, Illinois being the largest producer of pumpkins. So, specialty crops, there's always an opportunity for cover crops in those. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more challenging, and it's just very different from crop to crop how that works. And it's definitely something I haven't gotten much of a chance to work with. Most of my focus and energy has been on the corn and soybeans, since that is such a huge part of Illinois, but it's something, the specialty crops are, a good opportunity to have that, maybe on a smaller scale, but still very important to do that. So it's certainly a great opportunity to incorporate that in there. And, in those operations, there's typically more manual labor, hands-on, smaller scale. So it's sometimes, like I said, easier to do, sometimes more challenging.
Thank you, Stacy. All right, I have one more question here, and then maybe we will let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. So we have from Ron, can covers and horseradish be done together?
I'm pretty sure they are. I
Yeah.
had a conversation with a farmer down in Southwest Illinois there who's doing cover crops with horseradish. Is certainly a possibility. Again, it's a little different. The entire operations are different, but it's certainly a possibility. I think there's an opportunity for that in almost all of our soils, our crops that are growing. It's just, we need to keep in mind the context that we're doing this and what is most effective and what is the best way to address our resource concerns and address soil health.
Yes, thank you. I think most of our speakers, including you this week, have definitely touched on that everyone's situation is unique and we can't always apply what Rick Clark is doing over in Indiana to what we're doing here. We can take some of the tools that he's telling us, but I think everyone has a unique soil biome that we all have to pay attention to and experiment and see what works best. And start slow, like you said. Don't bite off more than we can chew. Okay. All right, Stacy. if there are no other questions, I think I will let you enjoy the rest of your day, or you are more than welcome to hang out and enjoy a presentation from Michelle with the IDNR on the CREP program, and her partners will be on after that. But again, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciated this statewide glimpse of what soil health is looking like, what our barriers are, and what some opportunities are. I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with NRCS and to overcome those barriers and increase soil health in Illinois.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here, and have a great day for everyone.
Thank you, Stacy. All right. Okay, so up next, we are moving into our innovations in soil health in Illinois, where we are going to learn about some various programs and that are here in Illinois that you can learn a little bit more about, take advantage of, and we'll have some interaction time, networking time a little later in the program. But right now, I am going to welcome Michelle Bloomquist. She is the manager of the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, otherwise known as CREP. You may not have heard of CREP in a little while, but it's back, and Michelle is going to tell us all about it. Just a little bit about Michelle. She is So she's with the Department of Natural Resources. She's been there since 2019. And prior to that position, she worked in a variety of natural resource and wildlife related jobs. She has worked with the U.S. Department of Ag, the Illinois Natural History Survey, Southern Illinois University, and Michigan DNR. So she has a lot of experience that she is bringing to our lovely Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And she currently lives in Petersburg. I hope you're taking advantage of that new delicious restaurant that just opened up there, Broad Gauge. That's one of my new favorites. She enjoys hiking, fishing, and camping. Same here, Michelle. Well, I am going to put the spotlight on you, and I will let you take it away. If you need help sharing your screen or anything, just let me know.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes, that looks great.
Awesome. So thank you for having me here today. And like Liz said, CREP has been gone for a little while. So this program actually is about over 20 years old. It's been around since the late 90s. And the reason you haven't really heard a lot about it is, we've been closed for almost 7 years. I won't go into, the details of, the budget impasse and how we had to close and all the obstacles that we've faced these past 7 years. But I will say, yes, we are coming back. We're looking at just a few months, sometime in 2022, we're hoping that we can reopen CREP. So that is our hope for this year to open up. We're working, both us and our partner FSA are working on our policy changes. We're amending those. Some of the things I talk about today might be a little bit different when we reopen, just because those policies aren't in place yet. So I'm going to tell you, not very many changes, but just a few changes. So if you kind of think about this when we reopen, be, hey, she said this, that's why. So there's a few changes to it. So first and foremost, CREP is a partnership program. So we can't do CREP without all of these people and more than these people that are listed here on this page. This program is an epitome of partnership. We work closely with very many governmental agencies and non-governmental agencies to implement CREP. All right, so I'll go over the basics of CREP since CREP has been gone for so long. A lot of you might not know what it is or how it works or anything like that. So CREP is an enhanced version of the Conservation Reserve Program. So it is, the CRP, which most people know CRP. We add that E in there, that enhanced. And what we do is we take frequently flooded, environmentally sensitive cropland and enroll that into a federal CREP CRP contract with the Farm Service Agency. And then how the DNR works into that to the state side is we extend the terms of that contract with FSA by putting a conservation easement on the land for 15 years, 35 years, or in perpetuity. beyond that federal contract. So landowners, basically, they remove their croplands from production and they receive compensation from both FSA and DNR. And you know, as most of you know, 90% of Illinois is privately owned. So this program is, you know, essential for, you know, addressing some of these issues that Illinois faces right now. And the CREP goals, so each state has their own CREP goals. Not all states have CREP. So we're all kind of a little different. And so we get to pick, you know, what is the most important environmental issue that's going on in Illinois. And it's a hot topic right now, water quality, you know, water quality and soil health, obviously. That is our main goal. Our main goal is to improve the water quality by reducing the runoff of sediment and nutrients and into our watersheds. And by doing that, we also improve our wildlife habitat and our fish habitat for, you know, those species who definitely need that improvement. All right, so where is CREP? It's not everywhere in the state. It's basically kind of limited to the central, you know, part of the state. So we're looking at the Illinois River watershed, which is that top darker green area on this map. And that enrollment began in 1998. And then we also added in 2010 the Kaskaskia River watershed, so that lighter green area. So those are the two watersheds that are eligible for CREP enrollment. The land needs to be in the 100-year floodplain. So that's what that dark blue lines are. Those are the 100-year floodplain. So you can see, you know, up in this area, these are all tributaries of the rivers, all the floodplain areas. So the cropland needs to be in that, or if it's outside of that, it needs to be a prior wetland. So, you know, previously farmed, wetland farmed under natural conditions, those type of things. All right, so I'm going to go into, there's two sides to CREP, like I said. There's the federal side and there's the state side. So this is the federal side of CREP, so which we call federal CREP. So landowners, so FSA can enroll up to 232,000 acres of cropland and marginal pasture land into federal CREP. Where the FSA side is about 65,000 acres right now, so we've got a lot of room to grow. The contract for FSA with the federal CREP contract is a 15-year contract. Most CRPs are 10 years, so we get a little bit longer of conservation with that. The landowner gets an enhanced soil rental rate on top of those CRP rates. FSA pays for 50% of the cost share to install those conservation practices on the land. And FSA and NRCS are responsible for the maintenance and the management of those acres during that contract. And something that's a little new from a previous time that CREP was around is all federal CREP contracts will go into a state easement. So they will participate in the state side of the program as well. So for those of you who are familiar with CRP, this is our list of eligible practices that can be enrolled on the federal side. Each state, again, gets to pick what practices they want. So these are all of our conservation practices that can be installed on CREP. All right, so now the state side of CREP. So what we do is we extend and enhance the federal acres. And how we extend that is, like I said, we have an easement that the timing of that easement starts at the end of that federal CREP contract. So for a landowner who enrolls their cropland into a federal CREP contract, they have 15 years of the federal CREP contract, and then they have 15 years of the state easement. If they choose that 15-year easement, they've got 15 years. So you've got 30 years of conservation right there. So that extends the time that that land is out of production, that it's growing. It's the soil is increasing, the soil health is increasing, and it's going to remain that way. And many of our easements that we currently have are in permanent easements, so those will be protected forever. And another way that we help out with the federal CREP acres is we enhance them with something that we call additional acres. So additional acres are the land that surrounds those federal CREP acres. So they're the contiguous acres that are around that kind of help with enhancing that acreage. I'll show you a little example of what those additional acres are in just a minute. So the landowner receives a lump sum payment from DNR. It's a one-time payment that's submitted at the end when the easement is executed. And then DNR reimburses the 50% that's remaining of that cost share. So that landowner receives 100% cost share for establishment on those federal acres. Now this map here is showing you, these are actual easements that are in place in Hancock County. And these are just the federal CREP acres. So these are the farm fields that were being farmed prior to enrollment. They've enrolled it with the federal CREP. They've put it into conservation. And as you can see, it's doing a good job. They are protecting this, this watershed right here, this river that's here, we're preventing the nutrients and the sediment runoff from those fields into this watershed. But some of the fields are small and they're segregated. So that's where our additional acres come in. So this here is showing you those exact same farm fields with our additional acres. The green area is our additional acres. So this creates a corridor of protection. It's a corridor for wildlife and fish habitat. It truly protects those areas of this watershed to keep that conservation intact. And all of these are permanent easements right now. So this area that we're looking at, that's permanently protected. All right, so who implements this program at a local level? That's the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, or the SWCDs. They're our second biggest partner in this program. They are the ones who are on the ground, boots on the ground, talking to the landowners, implementing this program at a local level. They perform enrollment. They assist with the landowners' questions on their easement. They conduct monitoring, and they're that local contact for information on their easement. And CREP could not exist without the SWCDs. They are a huge partner and a huge help to us. They are a great set of people to work with. Oh, sorry. And then, so here's a map of our current easements. Those little red dots, if you can see them, I know they're probably a little bit blurry on this, but those are all where all our easements are. So as you can see, the Illinois River watershed, that one it's got a lot of easements. That's because we've had enrollment since 1998. That Kaskaskia area in the south, it's only had 5 years of enrollment before we closed. So there's a lot of potential down there, and we haven't gotten a whole lot of it enrolled yet. So we're hopeful that that's going to be a good area to grow. There's more places that don't have a lot of easements. If you look at Northeast Illinois, we got a lot of potential up there. So those areas are our growth areas. So if you can see that we have over 1,300 easements protecting 90,000 acres. So a majority of those are permanently protected. All right, so I'll give you just a little bit of information on what the easements are. They basically we're purchasing, the IDNR is purchasing the conservation rights to the property. We're not purchasing the property rights. The landowner still maintains their private ownership. What's permitted on the land is they can still use it for recreation, hunting, including leases, fishing, temporary camping, those type of things. They can manage for forest, doing timber stand improvements, things like that. Wildlife management, we can manage for different wildlife species that the landowner wants to. They can maintain those roads and waterways and existing structures that are already there. Now what's prohibited is the agricultural production, obviously. Any residential, commercial, or industrial development, surface mining, new buildings or improvements, or new roads. So basically we want to protect the intent of that easement, which is conservation. So we don't want to tear up that conservation cover. There is opportunity if the landowner chooses that they want to enhance the area. If they want to plant trees, that's great. We will work with them. We can write a management plan for that to help that landowner reach their goals. So the easements are monitored every 3 years. We just are looking at compliance for whether or not that easement still looks the way it should. And the SWCDs or IDNR do those monitoring. The easement runs with the land. So the land is the deed, this easement is recorded against the deed. And that's recorded at the county courthouse. So anytime a landowner is going to sell that land, it will come up on the title work. And that new landowner will be obligated to participate in the program and follow those same rules that were already in place. Easements cannot be bought back, and public access is never required by DNR or the SWCDs. It can be if the landowner chooses to, but we don't require that. And we try to work with our landowners. We try to, work as a team with the SWCDs to meet those landowner goals. We want to make sure that they enjoy their land and that they, get out of it what they want to. So, if they're looking to get more deer on their land, we're going to help them to get more deer on the land. We're going to show them, how to manage their land for whatever their goal is. So that is our goal is, happy landowners make good conservation. So we try to do that. And, this program is, essential, like, keeping those landowners happy and, keeping that conservation in place. So that was kind of my quick rundown on what CREP is and how it works. Obviously, you're going to hear a lot more about this, coming up in the next few months. There'll be some, media events and releases coming out soon when we start getting to reopening. The opening date will be submitted once we figure that out, once we get all of our policies in place. On the screen is our website and our email address. So this is the best way to get a hold of us if you need to, if you have any questions about CREP. This is a email address that, for all of us basically. So if there's any questions, I am happy to answer them. I will stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Let's see. We did get a couple questions here. I did ask if there's anyone who is enrolled in CREP, and Ted Kreshkoff has 80 acres enrolled since 2011. Let's see. Tim says he would love to see that easement map overlaid with the soil types map we saw from Stacy's presentation. Just a fun, a fun project. Eric, where can one see recorded past pres? Oh, that's for me. And okay, Scott, are all easements created equal? CREP easements versus easements through the Land Conservancy and other organizations? In other words, do they or might they differ from each other?
So each easement has their own, permitted and prohibited items. So an easement, basically, you're purchasing a portion of that that property. You're not purchasing the property outright. So what CREP does is we're purchasing the conservation rights. Other easements, you have easements for access to roads. Obviously that's not a conservation easement, but that is an easement. So easements can vary. It's whatever that easement document says, and that's what the landowner and the entity who's holding that easement agree to at that time.
Thank you, Michelle. Any other questions for Michelle? Tamara, there are a lot of people with existing easements from Rocky Express gas pipeline and other gas pipelines and new CO2 capture pipeline coming. Does CREP easement work with the requirements of those easements?
So, we do have times where, and I am familiar with the CO2 pipeline. We've been in contact with them already. What we do is we work with the entity who is, doing the work, whether it's an Ameren, it's transmission line, something like that. And we do subordinate our easement to public good projects. So something that's going to come through, we're going to subordinate and allow it because it is, a public good project. We do work with those entities to make sure that we try to avoid those easements as much as possible. We try to move, we just had a transmission line a few months ago that they wanted to go straight through the easement. And we said, how about you, reroute it? So what they did was they just went on the edge of that easement. So a lot less impact. And that's what we try to do is, reduce the impact as much as possible. But if it's a public good project, we will subordinate our easement to allow that, that to go through.
Thank you. Okay, and let's see. Just kind of following up with that, and then another question from Ron. Do you know if the CO2 pipelines have public domain rights?
I do not know that.
Okay. And Ron also asks, how do you work with the Nature Conservancy? Do they already have the easement? Like what do you do? What work do you do with them if you work with them?
So recently we worked with the Nature Conservancy on advising us on, when with reopening CREP, we've worked, closely with Ashley Maybanks on, figuring out how to reopen and, kind of planning that out. So they've given us a lot of advice. We don't have any easements with them or anything like that. It really is just a support for us. To kind of help us as we navigate this incredibly hard road to get this program back up on its feet.
Thank you for navigating that road. I know it's been a challenge with taking different routes, but we really appreciate all of your work, Michelle.
Thank you.
Okay, I think maybe one more question here, and then we're going to introduce Bob and Mike. Okay, so Tamara asks about her CREP easement. Can we add trails and small bridges to access across a river if we have a CREP easement? My property is cut in half by the Sangamon South Fork River, just to kind of give you a perspective.
Yeah, so if you can't get access to a part of your property, contact us, contact your local soil and water district, and we can work with you. We can try to figure out, is there a way to, get access, through a neighboring landowner, or, if need be, we can help you with, potentially putting, a bridge over that area. We want to work with you to make sure that we put it, it's a good, culvert, that it's not going to cause any extra erosion or anything like that. So, definitely we can work with you on any problems that you have on your easement. So just give us a call or send an email to that dnr.crep@illinois.gov, and we'll work with you.
Great. I'll put that in the chat too in just a second. One more question, because I know we still have like a couple minutes here. So one more question from Tim, and then we're going to move on. So just talking about the different land here, some land is suited for ag, but it may be good for conservation easement, but not always. How about the quality of land for conservation? Is that considered, or is anything accepted in this?
So the first requirement to get into CREP is that you have to have a federal CREP contract. So FSA and NRCS will do their eligibility requirements for the program. So they will determine if that land is eligible. And one of those requirements is a cropping history. So if you don't have cropping history, it most likely will not qualify for a federal CREP contract. The acres that we add additional to that are additional acres. Those don't have to be cropped. They can be timber, they can be, any other, in another CRP contract, so those type of things, we can put any of those in there. But they do need to meet our goals, our CREP goals. And that is one thing. They need to enhance those federal acres, and they need to meet those CREP goals. So that is our key to what can go into CREP.
All right. Great answers, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here and letting us know about CREP making a comeback. We will make sure to keep everyone informed if what we learned today changes a little bit. But I look forward to seeing this and seeing all of your hard work carry out.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the time.
All right. Well, next up, we have Bob Caveney and Mike Chandler. Bob is the Farm Programs Manager in the Office of Land Management at Illinois Department of Natural Resources. A lot of his duties include the ag leasing work and the wildlife propagation centers, pheasant hunting program, field trials, dog training areas, and hound running areas. And Mike Chandler has been with IDNR for 28 years. He is the Ag and Wildlife Habitat Lease Management Program Manager. The majority of his time has been with the Private Lands District Wildlife Biologist out of the Havana field office. and he has been in this ag lease land program. He's been the manager since 2018. So we are really excited to hear from Bob and Mike today. All right, slideshow is coming up, and I will let you two take it away.
Thank you, Liz. I'm gonna let Mike kind of start it off here. I'm Bob Cavey. I'm the farm programs manager. I deal kind of with the compliance on our ag leases as well as deal with the soil health. Mike deals more with the leasing issues and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to let him start it off.
All right, thanks, Bob. Yeah, this is exciting times. Bob and I have talked about this for a couple of years now, trying to incorporate cover crops and some more regenerative agriculture in our ag leases. So Liz, thank you for putting this together. Hopefully we can get the word out there and do some fun stuff, to be honest with you. But as you can see on the slide, DNR, we manage roughly 36,000 acres statewide in our agriculture program. Keep in mind that, Bob and I and most of the wildlife biologists and site supers realize that agriculture plays a key role in wildlife management on our state sites if it's done in the right way. And that's one thing that we're trying to do. So we certainly encourage and promote our agriculture in that way to manage for wildlife. Our tenants are a key part in helping us manage that. We're able to utilize them to help us if we have exotics encroaching in some fields. Certainly they can use their equipment to control that and then write that time off the lease. So it's kind of in-kind services, so to speak. So it's a win-win situation for all of us. And then Bob scrolled down. There we go. All right, yeah, Bob's leading the way. So as you can see it in the narrative, I'm not going to read the whole thing up there. But we do want to promote ecologically sound agriculture practices. As I mentioned, it's important. We want to be a leader with our other state agencies, Department of Ag and EPA, and our NGOs. We want to be leaders with them to promote ecologically sound agriculture, to help the lease, to help the habitats, to help our constituents of Illinois. It's important for them when they come to our sites to enjoy it, whether it's for photography, if it's for hunting, turkeys, quail, whatnot. We have mountain bikes. We want them to enjoy the experience. And agriculture, if done the proper way, it's fantastic. So going on down now, we got, so you can see some of the managements that we do. We do burn. We manage some of our prairies. We incorporate, not every field's farmed every year. Sometimes we'll idle a field from time to time to get some pre-growth. It's good brood rearing habitat. We have the dove hunting programs on our sites, and our tenant farmers are an integral part of that. They plant the sunflowers for us. They help manage that. They will mow them for us, just getting ready for the hunting season. And not only for hunting, I was up in Jubilee State Park last couple of years ago. Bob was with me, and sunflowers were blooming, look beautiful. And there's just a row of cars along the side of the road, and we're like, what in the world's going on? And it's photography. It's crazy. A lot of our state sites, people come from all over just to take pictures in our sunflower fields. So it's really neat. But with our cropping plans on our sites, the district wildlife biologist works hand in hand with our site superintendents to develop these plans. Each plan's different for each site. Okay, we just don't have a blanket cropping plan for every site because it's dependent upon what the wildlife management goals of that site. What are we managing for? Do we have to leave, or do we want to leave some crop standing for some food plots? And some of our most southern sites like Union County, Horseshoe Lake down in Alexander County, we've been utilizing kind of like cover crops really for a long time because we'll come back after corn or beans and we'll plant 300, 400, 500 acres of wheat just for the winter, and then it'll be tore up and farmed again just to manage the migrating waterfowl. Back in the day, Horseshoe Lake and Union County was, they would winter 750,000 Canada geese, within a month period. We had to provide a lot of food for them. Things have changed over the years and now not so much. But now we'll have over 1.5 million snow geese down in that area. And winter wheat is a important part for that, migration. So, we've kind of utilized that. So each cropping plan is different for every site. Sometimes we utilize some cover crops already in some of our sites, which is encouraging. And the one thing that we're trying to do, as was mentioned earlier in one of the presentations, where with rental of properties, it's hard for the current tenant to invest in that property with doing cover crops to get the soil health up. And currently our leases are 4-year leases. And so we understand that. So that's one thing. We have the RCP program. Bob's going to touch on that here in a little bit, I'm sure. But we're also entertaining and doing some research to possibly lengthen our contracts so we can utilize cover crops and the tenant can get more out of their time spent and effort to do cover crops, get the soil health up, because we realize that the soil health is really important for our state sites. So again, it's a team effort with our cropping plans between the district wildlife biologists and the site staff. So with that said, I think I'll hand it over to Bob. And then at any time you got some questions, just chime in. And I'm sure Bob and I can answer them the best way we can. Thank you all.
Well, as Mike kind of segued into, we do use our tenants to help manage our parks in many instances, help us manage for our hunting programs. Some of the big things with that is planting sunflowers and winter wheat, and that some sites are required to plant legumes that they are allowed to hay, but most generally do not. So, I mean, that includes alfalfa, clover type plantings that are left fallow for a year, that create good wildlife habitat as well. And so we're constantly looking at ways to help improve what we're doing on the ground, to help our hunting programs, as well as, benefit the tenant farmers too. So the big thing with site management going on, like I said, our tenants are a huge aspect of that. Currently, the DNR is looking to go into more of a conservation agriculture rotation with our crops. We're looking at incorporating cover crops. We recently got a regional conservation partners program grant working with the conservation fund out of Chicago. So we're a partner in an overall RCPP throughout the state. And we're looking to take about 8,000 acres of our currently row crop ground, about 25%, into a reduced tillage cover crop rotation. And what we want to do with that is, like Mike said, we do have 4-year leases right now. So with that program, we're looking basically to help get the tenant farmer over the hump of 3 to 5 years, as most agricultural literature states that it takes for a tenant or a farmer to see reduced input costs and help improve their soil health. And so over the 3 to 5 year period, we're basically going to cost share the farmer. 50% basically would come from the NRCS through direct RCPP payments, and then the IDNR is going to allow up to the other 50% to be written off of their agricultural leases, so they just won't pay to us in cash rent. And one of our main goals is to give our tenant farmers an opportunity to learn how to use this system, how it can work in their operation, because we want them to take it back to their own private farms as well, because most of our tenants do farm ground adjacent to our parks or near them. So we're trying to extrapolate the benefits over, the entire landscape. Some of the main things we are looking at with the IDNR is, not only the soil health parameters, but how overwintering wildlife are responding to this. So concurrent with our RCPP, we're working with the University of Illinois to do bird surveys on our cover crop fields to see the difference in overwintering wildlife. One big thing we do want to look at, along our sites do have endangered ground nesting birds, and so some cover crops may not be an option or different termination methods. Our biggest issue would be roller crimping. When you do that in May in an area that has an endangered ground nesting bird, that's not necessarily good for nests. So we're kind of looking at all those different aspects of that as well that can be incorporated into the tenants' overall system. Some other things that we're doing on our DNR sites, to help protect wildlife as well as, promote conservation agriculture is we do not allow any neonic treated soybeans on state sites. We do allow neonic treated corn seed. You cannot do foliar spraying of any neonic pesticide or dicamba. The reason we do allow treated corn seed on our land is that when it is treated seed, the neonics are incorporated into the plant. Now, since corn is wind pollinated, most of your pollinator insects and stuff, the bees and that kind of stuff, usually do not mess with corn plants, or they're not there to pollinate from them. And so where they can with soybeans. And so we want to make sure that we're not affecting the pollinator species that we're trying to protect as well, while still having that in our crop rotation. Like I said, there's also no foliar application neonics or dicamba. Dicamba has been a hot topic issue for several years in the state, and we've had several of our parks damaged by dicamba or 2,4-D drift across the state, and we do monitor that on an annual basis, but we do not allow any of that type of application on our sites. Now, to help implement more of the nutrient loss reduction strategy in Illinois as well, we do not allow any fall tillage in our new leases. They can do it with written permission, but that's going to be very rare that we do allow that. And we do not allow fall nitrogen applications on our ground. Most of our ground is not tiled either, so we don't have as much of a worry about nitrogen leaching and that kind of stuff. From that, but to be good stewards of the land and kind of set a demonstration for the rest of the state and help implement what many other state agencies and our partners are working on with the nutrient loss reduction strategy. We decided those were good fits to do in our ag leases. We do allow vertical tillage, to help incorporate some of the residue, but mainly to help incorporate our cover crop seed as well. Another major thing that the DNR is doing is collecting our own soil samples to monitor soil health. In the past, this was kind of left up to the tenant farmers as part of their contract, but it was very inconsistent on if we get samples back and know what we had out there. Some farmers, tenants in the past will not do it. So we started to do this ourselves in-house, basically either us collecting the samples or having a private entity do that for us. And that way we can monitor the fertility of the soil. And then we're also working with the University of Illinois, the soil health lab over there, to monitor, carbon sequestration and that kind of stuff. So we can look back at, what we're doing and how the soil is improving over time. And so we're just getting off the ground with that really right now and getting going with our CPP. The first batching period was actually last Friday. So the funding from the NRCS finally come through, and we're actively signing up farmers. So I've been busy the last couple of weeks talking to many of our tenants in our target areas, trying to gauge their interest and get them to fill out the application and take into the local NRCS offices so we can start getting those reviewed and hopefully execute some contracts, coming here probably the middle of the summer before we're ready to plant those. Another major thing is we do have date restrictions on our hay leases. We got about 2,500 acres that are purely hay leases, as well as we do have about another 1,500 to 2,000 pasture leases. And we do put date restrictions on when they can hay those leases, mainly to, promote for nesting birds. So it's usually before April 1st or April 15th in most parts of the state, and they can't do it again until after August. Main thing is it's all about our customers and trying to improve habitat, improve the hunting experience, improve their recreational experience, as well as be a good steward of land and a good demonstration site of how all these things can work together. State parks are open to everyone, and that's why incorporating this cover crop program and what we're doing, everybody can come there and see how it can work, as well as our tenants get the opportunity to learn how to use it and move it back to their own farms. Well, that is all I had. We've probably got some time for questions. Let me stop sharing my screen here.
Yes, all right. Thank you both so much for your time. It's really nice to see everything that your programs are doing and the work that you're doing to improve these sites for folks like me to go and be able to enjoy. So it's much appreciated. We did have a couple questions in the chat. Just some folks praising you for the great concept. Really a good question here that I kind of want to tag on to is, Bob, you mentioned that the applications are opening up soon. So I think, how best can we spread awareness of that, and how can conservation groups and others help to support the work that you're doing?
Well, like I said, the actual batching period for the RCPP ended the 4th last Friday. So I've been in constant contact, and Mike's been helping me, and Kaylor, his assistant as well, contacting many of our site superintendents to talk to their tenant farmers. We also sent letters and emails and contacted many of the tenant farmers directly ourselves to talk to them about the program and what's available and how to basically apply, put in the application with each of their local NRCS offices to do that. I know most of the local NRCS offices had a training on their RCPP availability here last month. I think that was the first week of February at some time. So some of the district conservation, it's kind of new to them as well. So we're all kind of in the learning process together and moving forward. But I mean, as far as, aiding in getting the word out, is working with the local state sites right now. I think there's a 27 county target area within the Conservation Fund RCPP working lands for wildlife. So we're working with Emmy Brawley and the group up there, and a lot of different groups, especially in Northeast Illinois, to help implement this. So,
thank you. And we do have so a question on why you have not used no tillage instead of reduced. Why have you used no tillage instead of reduced tillage? Just talking about the different improvements that have been shown with no-till, potentially showing better results in terms of healthy soil.
I think one of the reasons we haven't used no-till at this point is, like mentioned in the intro, I've been involved in the program here for 4 years. Bob came on 3 years ago. So we're incorporating a lot. We're making a lot of changes with our ag leases. So it's kind of like baby steps right now. The one thing that we're trying to do before we make some drastic changes is educate our current tenants and educate past tenants that potentially are going to bid on this, so that they're prepared for, going from reduced tillage to no-till if we decide to do that, or others. So we're kind of, it's a great concept, and no-till certainly is very beneficial to the wildlife and to the soil. So that's something that we are entertaining. Again, we're just kind of biting off little pieces at a time as we move forward. But unfortunately, as state government goes, or any government, things do take time. And with our leases currently being four-year leases, it takes that much time to recycle some of that stuff. So that was a great, I'm glad the Dr. Sadi asked that question, because it is on our plate to think about and hopefully move forward with it. Bob, you have anything to add to that?
And that's what right now, we do want to go to a more no-till situation in many places as we can. But there is some situations where, like Mike said, it's not in our contracts yet because we're still incorporating it into the 4-year rotation of those leases coming in and out of expiration. So we're trying to work that in. I mean, yes, we definitely want to move toward more no-till than anything. And I basically say reduced tillage because we do get questions and stuff sometimes from farmers, that may want to do it 1 year, and that's where we have to do the written permission for them. So it has to come through, and they have to get authorization through us in order to do that. So we are trying to go 100% no-till, but we'll keep that option on the table in case we have to. So we are working that way.
Thank you. And just speaking to just the evolving, how this program is evolving and some practices are changing, how would you say that your tenant farmers have responded to changes, perhaps in practices and maybe, I know that you are working with the STAR program, you know, how did they respond to filling out the STAR form? That's Saving Tomorrow's Agriculture Resources, for those that maybe don't know that acronym.
So we're just getting kicked off with the STAR program because that's basically all of our tenants that do sign up for the RCPP. We're going to require them to fill those forms out as part of, the reduced amount that they have to pay us in cash rent in order to do that. So we're in the process, like I said, all those applications really went in last week. And so we'll have a better idea of who gets selected in the contracts that are getting off the ground with all of that. We've used a couple sites across the state as demonstration sites and kind of learn the do's and don'ts and what works within our hunting programs. Wayne Fitzgerald State Park down in Southern Illinois and Middle Fork State Park over by Danville have been some of our test sites and kind of learning what works and what doesn't with our hunting programs. The first year we did it down at Wayne Fitzgerald, we planted a bunch of turnips and that kind of stuff. Well, a bunch of hunters rolled their ankles on it and weren't very happy with us about that. So we kind of, switched up the species mix that we put in there to try to make it more beneficial to both the hunting programs as well as, create the soil health. So we were kind of learning the ins and outs and that kind of stuff there at that point. So like I said, we are going to use the STAR forms, all the tenants that do get contracts through the RCPP, we're going to do that. Eventually, if we can get a few more staff on back under me, we can start doing it with more tenants. Right now we're able to do a lot of good stuff, and there's really 3 of us working on the ag lease program where historically there was only 1 person. So we're already making huge leaps and bounds and strides on changing the program and implementing more smoothly across the state and trying to incorporate some of these. But as Mike said, it's going to take some time, and I would love to do it with every tenant that we have, but I think a good starting place would be the ones that we're working through with our CPP.
Yeah. And Liz, you asked how it's being, accepted across with a lot of our tenants. I try to speak with a lot of our tenants. In fact, I laugh because each month I get my phone bill and I'm supposed to sign off every time there's a phone call over 45 minutes and my whole thing is filled up because I try to listen and hear what they have to say. And as mentioned, I was in the Havana field office and work. So I know a lot of the landowners and our tenants. I knew them at Jim Edgar Panther Creek. So I sit and I try to listen, and some are very receptive to what we want to do and very receptive and have kind of looked at me and goes, yeah, I've been wanting to do cover crops for a while, but yet there's still some that are saying cover crops don't work. Nobody wants to do cover crops. I don't know why I can't till in the fall. And, there's still a lot of that. And it's just a matter of, hopefully they'll see the results, when you see other people doing it and doing well. The bottom line is once they get talking at the coffee shops, you know how it works. Hopefully more will get involved because, Bob and I are, we're the government, so, trying to tell them here's how we want to do it is hard. So just listening and talking with them. I hope it's going to work, but I'm encouraged with the momentum we got.
Just hearing that, I am too. And I know that you all are doing a terrific job, and there's other organizations too that offer great community for folks to go and talk about different challenges and barriers and successes. And like we have talked about today constantly, every system is different, every soil type is different, and just finding what's right for that person, for them to start seeing those benefits is the first step. And these incentive programs are also a great way to start out so they can start seeing those changes on the ground. Okay, so keep writing in some questions. I do have a question here from Tim, and there was a little bit of pushback on the neonic and just different studies showing that I know that prior you had said that for soybeans, you do not allow the neonic seed, but for corn you do because of certain reasons. And there are a little pushback on the studies showing that this is different. How would you want to respond to that?
Well, one thing I didn't put in there is we do require them to use a seed lubricant for corn seed as well to help reduce the amount of dust and that kind of stuff that goes into it. Our major thing with our ag lease program as well is, basically to get untreated corn seed, you have to order basically right after the seed is harvested the prior October. Now that might work for a farmer that owns the land, but with tenant farmers, they may be at the end of their lease, and we may get a new tenant after the 4-year contract, and there's no really way to have the ability to order that seed and stuff as well. I know there is some impact there, but that's what we're trying to minimize it by what we're doing and stuff, as well as our ag lease program is a major source of revenue for the DNR that's used for a lot of our habitat projects and such. So, invasive species removal and improving our sites for our hunting operations and recreational opportunities, a lot of that does come through our ag lease funding. And, in order to keep that going, a lot of our other funding sources have been drying up and being cut out over the last several years. DNR in the last 20 years is down to about 45% of the employees that we had, at the beginning of the century. And, so we're doing with what we can and trying to make it better for, the wildlife as well, and still living in with a reason with, working with our tenants and stuff and people to do this. Cause it would be a major setback if we wouldn't get anybody to lease on or bid on any of our leases due to some of the stipulations. And again, like Mike said, we're the government and we're out to get you apparently, but we're really not. I grew up farming in Macomb County, just south of Springfield, and I'm pretty intimate with a lot of this stuff. So, we're trying to do the right thing and still be able to move forward with what we're doing and reduce the impacts of those.
I do know that in doing research with talking with other states that are restricting neonics, I do know like on their leases, they actually purchase the seed and then give it to the tenants to plant and stuff. So that's kind of one roadblock with, with procurement and the way we can handle it here. So, that's why some organizations in other states are able to do and plant more neonic or non-treated neonic corn. So we're not really can do that at this point. So.
Understood. No, and thank you. And I think the budget discussion is a whole other can of worms that we can definitely open up and talk about. But I know that some budget hearings did go well. So not to give false hope, I'll knock on this fake wood on my desk here. But I really hope for the best that we can bring in some more experts like you to continue this great work. And just with what you, Mike, Bob, and Michelle, what you're all dealing with, the staffing levels and the work that you are getting done and the progress that you're making is just really commendable. And we are really grateful. Just over here on the Stewardship Alliance side, as me being just a consumer and a hiker, very grateful for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I am seeing nothing else in the chat box. If anything pops in, if you all are hanging on for a little longer and just want to type away, that would be appreciated, but I understand if you have to get back to your busy days. But Mike, Bob, Michelle, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and talking to us about the programs that you are working on over at DNR. Again, grateful for your work and looking forward to hearing some updates as the new leases start, as CREP comes back. We'll keep our ears to the ground.
Well, like Mike said, one of our biggest things, if we can get to the 5-year leases, even with that, so our tenants can start enrolling in some of the NRCS programs, EQIP and CSP as well. That's going to be a huge step. So we're in the process of trying to work through that right now, trying to extend our leases over 4 years. So
great. Well, however, we can be helpful with that, or other groups can be helpful to spread that word and to get more support for changing. If that's something we can help with, we're just a call away.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Everybody,
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone. Let me remove you all from the spotlight. One sec. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we have Bob from the Delta Institute is not able to make it with us today. He is feeling under the weather, unfortunately. So we do hope that he makes a speedy recovery. So Max Webster, if you are out there and can hear me, I know it's a little sooner than you had anticipated. All right, let me add you here. I see you. A little sooner than you had anticipated, but if you are ready to rock and roll, Max is the Midwest Policy Manager with the American Farmland Trust. A little new to the team, but he has made great strides over at AFT. He is working in the Midwest region, and he's done an incredible amount of work on state policy, working in some of the federal realms on Farm Bill. So Max, I can't wait to hear what you have to tell us about Climate Smart Ag. What's going on with some of the policies currently at the state level, what we can do to take some action. And yeah, I'm going to let you have the floor.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Liz. Really glad to be here. Really appreciative of Illinois Stewardship Alliance for having me join the conversation today. Want to thank Dick too for a really great welcome this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about some policy stuff that's happening at the state level here in Illinois. And we're going to start there, but if we have time and want to get into questions and other things like that about other stuff that's happening at the federal level or regionally, we can definitely do that as well. So I'm going to pull up some slides here. And can we see that, Liz, or?
Yes, that looks great,
Okay,
Max.
fantastic. All right, great. So I'm with American Farmland Trust. We are a national nonprofit organization. Our mission is saving the land that sustains us. So we really focus on three primary areas. That's protecting at-risk farmland, helping farmers institute practices that protect that farmland and sort of protect the value of that farmland over time from a farming operations and productivity standpoint, as well as environmental services that farmland provides. And then the third part is the people component. So so between land practices and people, people is what makes all this work happen. So trying to work with people to get them in place to be good stewards of the land, and have all the tools and resources they need to be successful in doing that. So our Midwest work has really focused on that middle part there, the practices component in recent years, but we're doing lots of other cool stuff around the region in terms of farmland protection and hosting things like learning circles through our Women for the Land initiative and other cool programs like that. But I'm going to talk about some of the policy stuff that's happening here in Illinois. And I'm going to focus a little bit on three themes that I think are really important in thinking about how to shape up soil health policy in Illinois in the coming years. So we're going to focus on the stuff that is happening this year in the General Assembly through the legislative session that's underway right now. But we're going to, hopefully start thinking about big picture. What does Illinois need to help move things forward? And the three things that I want to focus on are nutrient loss, climate, and access. Thinking about access in terms of the people who are participating in these programs, the lands that are able to enroll in programs, and all of those sorts of things. So I just wanted to start here. I was hearing a little bit earlier about, sort of the long work of soil health and how we've been at this for a long time. And so, if you look up here in the left-hand corner, Midwest seeks to conquer dust. So this is from a 1935 article that I found in the New York Times that, speaking to some of the early efforts to conquer the Dust Bowl back before there was anything like Soil and Water Conservation Service or any of those kinds of programs. And, folks were really working at the local level to try to confront some of these issues related to the Dust Bowl. And you can see, right up here at the top, some of the things that they're proposing. you know, our practices that we're still working on getting in place today. So cover crops right here, you know, cover crops proposed to hold down topsoil. And so, you know, some of these things we've been trying to get in place for a long time. And, you know, since the time you can see right here, this is Al Capone, you know, he's right there. Since the time Al Capone was working in Chicago, we've been trying to get cover crops in place. And so this is long work. It takes a long time. And I think we're finally hitting a period where hopefully we can accelerate a lot of progress and get those programs, resources and funding in place to help support farmers around the state. So zooming out before we zoom into Illinois, we want to talk a little bit about the status of soil health legislation around the country. And lots of states are taking action on soil health. And so what you can see here in the states in the green are states that have recently passed soil health legislation. So as of 2021, that includes 20 states around the country. The states in the purple are thinking about different pieces of soil health legislation, and the states in the blue actively have soil health legislation that's pending right now. So you can see there's a huge amount of interest thinking about soil health in states trying to take steps to protect and build soil health. You know, just sort of recognizing all the benefits that come from soil health related to farmer productivity, water quality, the climate, and everything else. And so, you know, states are trying everything they can right now to get themselves in a good place. Another driver that's making the soil health work happen, which is a really crucial component, is that you know, there's a lot of action at the federal level recently, and to be able to access some of these new federal proposals that are coming together and being introduced into Congress ahead of the next farm bill. You know, they require or are looking for leadership from the state in terms of soil health programs in order to match and bring some federal dollars to the state. So you see states taking preemptive action so they can be well positioned to bring some of those federal dollars to the state. And so that's a lot of what we're focused on here in Illinois too, is how can we put Illinois in a good position so that it can capture and bring new federal investment to the state to help support soil health efforts as well. So you'll see Illinois is highlighted in blue here because we have pending legislation this year that we're working on, and I'll touch on what some of those pieces are in just a minute here. So what's on the docket for the General Assembly? There are you know, 4 legislative acts that are being considered by the General Assembly that I think really speak to the need of soil health legislation in the state. You know, obviously the first one, why we're here talking today, really crucial, that Illinois Soil Health Week, and trying to work with Senator Bennett and Representative Meyer, who we heard earlier today, to get that resolution across the line so that we have that point in the calendar where we're constantly reflecting on, you know, Illinois' most important resource, its soils, and how we're doing all that we can to protect that valuable resource today and for future generations. Senate Bill 3471, the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail later on, because that's one of the priorities AFT is working on, as well as a lot of other partners across the state. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But I also wanted to touch on a couple acts introduced by Representative Harper, which are important. The Healthy Soils Act, which also seeks to set up a soil health program in the state of Illinois, similar to some of those efforts we see in other states around the country. And then Representative Harper has another act, the Black Farmer Restoration Act, which is really important for thinking about that access component, and you know, who's able to participate and be stewards of our land and of our soil resources, and who has access to that. You know, a really eye-opening statistic for me recently came from some research that AFT was doing, looking at you know, where farmers of color are located around the Midwest. there are just 9 counties in the Midwest that have 30 or more producers of color. So think about that. In all the counties of the Midwest, there's just 9 where you can find more than 30 producers of color. So finding ways to correct historic discrimination that has prevented access to programs and resources is really crucial, and something that we need to be thinking about as part of all of our soil health work. The second component of the policy work that is, really where the rubber meets the road is when it comes to the budget and trying to get funding out the door for programs and projects and staff, so that we have the capacity and the resources so that we can implement things at the level they need to be at. So the 4 things here that I think are super crucial to remember when it comes to the budget this year is that we need to renew the Partners for Conservation Fund. This is the primary source for state level cost share and other conservation dollars that are used by agencies in the state to help farmers and others implement soil health practices. If this does not get renewed, it expires at the end of this fiscal year. So at the end of June, this program, which has been in place for almost the past 30 years, will go away. So we really need the legislature to protect the Partners for Conservation Fund and renew that program for another year. The next one is the Fall Covers for Spring Savings Program. This is the cover crop insurance discount program that provides farmers who are planting cover crops with an option to receive a $5 per acre discount on their crop insurance premiums when they plant cover crops on those acres. So really important program, really popular program. This past year, there was enough funding to support adoption on 100,000 acres in Illinois, and that program sold out in a day, less than a day. Overall 185,000 acres were submitted to that program. So almost twice as many, or 172,000 acres this year, 185,000 last year. So almost twice as many acres as are available are being submitted to that program. So really crucial that that funding gets continued. And if we can find a way to expand that funding to provide some additional resources, I think that would be super great. This past year, in last year's budget, there was also funding that was dedicated for the first time to reaching the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. So that's the first time ever since the plan was adopted in 2015 that there's been dedicated funding for nutrient loss reduction, planning, management, implementation, all of those sorts of things. And so really crucial that we continue to get that funding in place to continue that good work. And then finally, none of this work happens without boots on the ground and those conservation professionals reaching out, making contact with local farmers and landowners and letting them know what resources are out there. So maintaining operational funding for soil and water conservation districts is something that's really crucial too, that we're keeping an eye on. So now I want to just sort of step into one of those policies in particular, the Senate Bill 3471, the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act. Talk a little bit about why this bill is important, what it's trying to address, and what are some components of that bill. And so we're going to start here with these 2 charts. And so these come from the Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy Biennial Report that just came out this past fall. And it sort of indicates or describes progress that the state is making towards reaching its nutrient loss reduction goals. And so if you look over here on the left with this little bar chart here, this 15% reduction of nitrates and 25% reduction of total phosphorus is where we're trying to get to by 2025. So below this baseline level that was set, we need to get 15% and 25% below that. And currently, as of last year, when they did this assessment, we were 13% above the baseline when it comes to nitrates, and 35% above the baseline when it comes to total phosphorus. So getting back down from 35% above to 25% below is a huge effort, especially when we're looking at, this 2025 deadline coming up right around the road. And so, we need resources. We need to think about how we can get programs and projects working in a better way so that we can make more progress towards those goals. Another really cool part about the nutrient loss reduction strategy is that it proposes these different scenarios for looking at how we can actually get towards reaching these goals. And so what you're looking at right here on the right side is one of those proposed scenarios, looking at how many acres enrolled in these different kinds of management and soil health practices do we need to see in order to approach the kinds of nutrient reductions that we're looking for in terms of our targets. The green that you're seeing here is where we're currently at in terms of our practice adoption, and the gray is where we need to get to. So you can see in most areas, there's a long way to go in terms of getting to the kinds of adoption levels that we want to see so we can start seeing sustained reductions in nutrient loss over time. That's particularly true in some of these areas like cover crops, where we need to see a lot more adoption to make progress here. So long story short, when it comes to the nutrient loss reduction strategy and the goals we set forward in that strategy, we're not on target. So we need to figure out how we can start getting back in that direction. So this is a map of cover crop adoption. It speaks a little bit to what Stacy Zuber was talking about a little bit earlier in terms of some of the particular challenges of getting cover crops and other conservation practices in place in Illinois. So the yellow, the orange, and the red, those signify higher levels of cover crop adoption. And you can see pretty much there's like a nice ring around Illinois where our neighboring states and our peer states in the region are doing much more to adopt cover crops than is happening in Illinois. So by and large in Illinois, we're still in that 1 to 5% cover crop adoption range across the state. Whereas if you're looking in some other states like Indiana or Michigan, you're looking probably more in that 5 to 10% adoption range. So we're not keeping pace with our peer states in terms of getting these practices in place. Some of that's down to what Stacy was talking about in terms of our soil types and trying to have the right message to go out to farmers. And the other part of that is just getting the resources and the capacity in place so that we can have those contacts with farmers and in landowners and do that outreach work, which is really crucial for getting people enrolled in programs. So, what does all this sort of end up when you don't have enough capacity, you're not on target with your goals? Headlines like this. So these are just cherry-picked a few headlines that I've run across over the past year in publications around the state, really highlighting the need and the demand to make progress when it comes to our nutrient loss issues, which are leading to sometimes pretty serious water quality concerns. And we know about the Gulf of Mexico dead zone and the challenges down there in the Gulf, but this is also leading to issues close to home too. And so thinking about the long-term sustainability and resilience of our lands and waters, we need to start making progress on this issue now. So that brings us to the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act and what's actually in it. So I wanted just to speak to the bill as it currently is in the legislature, which is that it has been amended. It had a funding section component to it previously, but that was removed ahead of its last bill hearing. And so the major components of the bill and what the bill tries to do is it creates what we're calling the Healthy Soils and Watersheds Initiative. And so this is modeling existing processes that are in statute related to the sediment and erosion control program and other programs that the Department of Agriculture and the Soil and Water Conservation Districts administer to get conservation funding out the door and to get technical assistance out to farmers. And it seeks to update those processes by integrating the science that we've collected through the nutrient loss reduction strategy and translating that down to a local level to help support individual conservation districts and using that statewide data at the local level to assist with project planning and thinking about how they can get resources to the most impactful places. The second thing that the bill does is it integrates climate planning into existing programs. So right now, climate is not a factor in the way that our state conservation programs are managed or how they make decisions. We know that climate is having an impact on the state's agricultural sector and just the state at large right now. So if we jump back here in the slide, you can see, one of the big drivers of this increased nutrient loss, river flow levels are up by 25% in this reporting period. So huge jump in the amount of rainfall and water that's coming to Illinois. And so if we're not considering how those impacts are going to play out over the next few years, we're going to have real challenges meeting our nutrient loss and soil health goals. So we need to get climate planning and considerations into how our programs work. The third part is that the program or the bill updates programs to include considerations for beginning, veteran, and socially disadvantaged farmers. So following those definitions that USDA uses for those groups, and just sort of thinking that, the issues that a beginning farmer, a veteran farmer, a socially disadvantaged farmer, what they're facing is, can be considerably different than the mainstream farmers sometimes. So if we need to enlist these folks in helping to reach our soil health nutrient loss reduction goals, we might need to be thinking about considerations for reaching these folks in a way that's different. So let's start thinking now about how we can do that. The fourth part is that the bill requires the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency to update its non-point source management program. So this is a really important program for administering the 319 grant program, which can provide some funding assistance for practice adoption, as well as helping local entities put together watershed basin plans. So these local watershed plans that really break down what's happening in a watershed and helps come up with a 20-year plan for how to address those issues. The non-point source management program has not been updated in Illinois since 2013. The US EPA recommends that those programs be updated every 5 years. So we're off of that timeline by quite a ways. And so a lot of the new stuff that we've been finding through the nutrient loss reduction strategy, climate considerations, all those sorts of things are not part of the program right now. So we want to get that stuff put in there. And then finally, we heard a lot from IDNR, the really great work that they're doing to get conservation practices in place on state-owned and managed ag lands. We just want to make sure that work continues. And so the bill directs the state to continue to do that work and think about ways to implement management practices on state-owned lands to make progress towards NLS goals. So that's what the bill is really focused on. And so trying to provide guidance around how to maximize the use of state resources to be most effective in getting projects on the ground while integrating some of the new research and studies and things like that have come together through the nutrient loss reduction strategy, through climate planning, and through other factors. So next, I want to shift gears a little bit, and I want to step away from the legislature, and I want to talk about some additional state agency initiatives that are happening related to climate smart agriculture, which are really, really exciting. Climate smart agriculture is one of those buzz phrases that's out there. Really, it just is a continuation of the same kind of soil health practices we've been talking about for a long time, but thinking about how to integrate thinking about greenhouse gas emissions and how practices are reducing greenhouse gas emissions sequestering carbon in soils, all of those sorts of things. So just bringing a new layer of consideration to how we're implementing conservation practices around the state. So wanted to start here just because it sort of just heightens the urgency of trying to do some of this work. This is a headline in response to the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, which came out with a new report last week, which just sort of highlighted some of the stresses that are really facing the agricultural sector around the world. And one of their considerations or conclusions was that global warming will progressively weaken soil health and ecosystem services such as pollination, increase pressure from pests and disease, and reduce marine biomass, animal biomass, undermining food productivity in many regions on land and in the ocean. So climate change is a real threat that we need to be responding to and putting in place practices that help to mitigate that risk, minimize some of the ill effects that could happen from warming temperatures, help farmers to be in better position to deal with wetter years, wetter springs that limit good planting days, and just be ahead of all that stuff before it becomes too much of a problem, because that's what's coming down the line. So what's been really exciting, I should say here too, is that when you look at conservation practices and where they can be most effective in terms of climate smart agriculture, using conservation practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and sequester carbon in soils. The two most prominent practices that have applicability here in the Midwest, cover crops and no-till. This is from an AFT study where we looked at the climate fighting potential of these two practices and where they would be most effective. The thing to look at here is the darker the place, the more impactful the practice is in that place. And so if you're looking at cover crops and the ability for cover crops to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon in the atmosphere, Illinois is the place to be thinking about doing that. You can see how dark it lights up on this map. And then similarly with no-till, Illinois is really got a lot of potential when it comes to using no-till as a practice to address climate change. So Illinois is really prime and ready to go to use its state agricultural resources to implement these practices and make a big impact. So there's huge opportunity and potential to implement climate smart practices in Illinois and have not just a benefit here locally, but really a global impact in terms of emissions reductions. So, one thing that's been really exciting, we heard a little bit about IDNR's RCPP project that they were awarded recently to implement conservation practices on their lands. The Illinois Department of Agriculture was awarded a regional conservation partnership program award in September this year as well, which is really cool, and it's going to allow them to focus on this climate smart component in how to implement climate smart practices in a way that makes sense for Illinois producers. And so they're working right now to pull together this Illinois Climate Smart Partnership through this RCPP, really focusing on three main components. And so the first one, climate smart agricultural champions. So showcasing those local level examples of climate smart agriculture and supporting peer-to-peer learning opportunities, which I think we've heard throughout the week that's such an important part, demonstrating success and then having peers sort of share what makes that work successful. The second part is incentivizing climate smart conservation practices, so expanding funding for those state programs that we talked about through the Partners for Conservation Fund or other sources to help get funding out the door to help support farmers. And then the third part is setting up this Agricultural Climate Smart Institute, which is really focused on expanding educational opportunities for all kinds of folks across the agricultural sector, which is much needed and really cool. So to help support the Illinois Department of Agriculture in getting things in place to help kick off this really big initiative. AFT, in partnership with the Association of Illinois Soil and Water Conservation Districts, decided to start pulling together some voluntary conversations with different stakeholders representing all kinds of different parts of the agricultural community in Illinois to try to get some initial feedback in place for guiding the state and implementing this RCPP, and just sort of, trying to, suss out and figure out, is the state on the right track? Is IDOA sort of on the right track in exploring, what's going on? And so this group, which we've been calling the Illinois Climate Smart Ag Working Group, just sort of evaluating things and trying to get things ready for IDOA to kick things off with this Regional Conservation Partnership Program, came up with a set of recommendations for initial work, sort of starting out where should, where are safe places where the department can feel comfortable moving things forward. So there's these 8 recommendations that the group has kind of settled on in terms of providing a starting place for advancing climate smart work in Illinois. And so, the first one, bare minimum, integrate climate smart agriculture into state strategies to fight climate change. So we've seen a lot of good work in the energy and transportation sector from the state level, but there's not a natural and working lands or other kind of strategy focused on agricultural and natural lands in Illinois. So we need to get that part integrated into how the state is thinking about addressing climate change. The second part, continue to empower Illinois Department of Agriculture to promote climate smart agriculture. They've been doing a great job with the RCPP and other efforts, and so continuing to give support for the department to do that. Build on and enhance existing state financial assistance programs. Really crucial. We don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to a lot of the ways we can get resources out the door for farmers and landowners. It just is about resourcing those existing programs in the right way and thinking about how they're managed to maximize climate benefits. The fourth part, really, really important, something that lots of stakeholders have been working on and that we need to continue to work on, and that's identifying long-term stable sources of funding for climate smart ag efforts in Illinois. We're still struggling in that space of not having long-term stable, dependable funding for climate smart ag or conservation efforts in the state, and we need to get there. Number 5, the state lost a lot of capacity from soil and water conservation districts and extension service as a result of the budget impasse and other budget challenges over the past decade. And so we need to focus on recovering that to provide technical assistance to farmers and landowners so that they know how to best implement climate smart practices. The 6th part, strengthening relationships with the private sector, exploring innovative partnerships to leverage public and private resources. There's no way that we can get all of this work done just through state programs. We need private partners coming on board to help support this. So how do we get alignment between state goals and what the private sector is working on? The 7th one is convening an advisory committee through the RCPP project, and importantly, including subcommittees within that advisory committee, which allow for more targeted focus on diverse audiences. So producers of certain types, different types of producers, landowners around the state, trying to create specific spaces where they can really address and answer questions about climate smart agriculture, where their voices might not be lost. So trying to make sure that all voices are captured and we're sort of moving all of Illinois' agriculture forward when it comes to climate smart opportunities. And then finally, use that advisory committee, use the people who have the on the ground knowledge to help address key challenges. So using those people to evaluate existing policies, funding levels, all of those sorts of things to say, hey, this is what we really need to move this work forward. So this is really a starting place for how to then build upon that and think about how to move climate smart ag work forward in Illinois. So I'm wrapping up here. I do want to say, when it comes to policy work, folks are always asking, what can we do? And so there's a simple message here that I want to reiterate in terms of reaching out. If you're going to reach out to legislators or lawmakers this year and stress the importance of soil health, 3 key things to focus on. And so, you could copy this word for word if you wanted to call your lawmaker and, read a script to them and let them know, what matters here. But, soil health is vital to Illinois' long-term sustainability and resilience. I urge you to support measures like the Joint Resolution 44 to create Illinois Soil Health Week so that we remind ourselves of that fact every year. I also encourage you to support initiatives like Senate Bill 3471, the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act, to update state programs to be responsive to today's natural resource challenges, and so that we can focus on getting resources to where they'll be most impactful. Finally, we can't protect soil health without funding. Please support increased funding for soil health programs like Partners for Conservation and Fall Covers for Spring Savings, and the work at state agencies and soil and water conservation districts that makes this work happen. So that's the message, that's the take-home message if you're going to do any outreach to folks. And finally, if you want to stay in touch or reach out to me directly, here's my contact information, and you can learn a ton more about soil health policy and work that's happening around the country through the Farmland Information Center. And so here's the link to that, so you can check in and look at all kinds of good stuff that's happening around the country. So with that, I think that's everything I have.
Max, that was incredible. Thank you so much. You took us on such a journey through what's going on and giving us ways that we can take action. That's always appreciated over here at the Alliance. Definitely have some questions, a couple questions about appropriations and funding, if you want to dig into those.
Sure.
So Bob asked what the total state appropriation ask for these programs are this legislative session. So I know Soil Health Week is no appropriation ask. So I think that this is mostly focusing on the Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act and the Partners for Conservation Program, kind of all combined.
Yeah. So it's a good question, Bob. And so if you're looking between the cost share program, the Partner for Conservation, operational support for soil and water conservation districts, funding for nutrient loss reduction strategy, fall covers for spring savings program, all of that stuff wrapped up together, you're looking at somewhere in the ballpark of like $15 to $18 million. So that's in the context of a state budget that's in like the $43 billion range. So, should be relatively a drop in the bucket. And even that, is not anywhere close to where we need to get to in terms of funding for these efforts over time. We need to be, closer to the $25 million, even higher every year to support this work going forward and maximize our ability to leverage state dollars for federal dollars. And so that's where that part about getting a long-term stable funding source in place is really crucial, and thinking about ways to do that. So that's some of the work that folks will be focused on over the next few years, is how can we get that long-term stable funding source in place.
Yes. And if you, want to join American Farmland Trust or the Alliance, we are working consistently with folks on ways that we can take action to continue to ask for level stable funding. And Dean Farr asked, what is the funding for staff, like commitment to help state agencies to implement the NLRS? I know there was some budget hearings, and can you recall any specific numbers?
Well, I don't know specific numbers currently in terms of implementing the NLRS. So right now, there's the $3 million roughly that was, dedicated for NLRS last year. That funding, I believe, still hasn't gone out the door. So agencies and conservation districts and everybody else still hasn't seen that money yet, though it's on its way. But largely the nutrient loss reduction strategy is supported by staff who are managing other programs at this point in time. So things that have been in place, whether that is the Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Land and Water Resources, and they're managing the cost share programs and everything else on top of that. The folks at IEPA who are managing the water quality programs. So the NLRS has really fallen on their shoulders in terms of moving that work forward, and they have a lot of other responsibilities too. So they desperately need capacity support and assistance to help take things to the next level. And so that's what we're really focused on is trying to get additional resources in place to help agencies staff up, get that capacity that they need to help move things forward.
Great answer. Thank you, Max. Bob also asked, is AFT looking at how to apply findings from Croatian Institute Soil Wealth report to increase private investment in soil health practices?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not familiar necessarily with that report from the Croatian Institute, Bob, but it's something that we are paying a lot of attention to. And, you know, not necessarily here in Illinois, but we do work with private investment type structures for getting resources in place for soil health work, like the Soil and Water Outcomes Fund through some of our project work in Ohio, for example. And so trying to work with impact investors and other folks like that to get additional private resources out the door and in the hands of producers is something that, yeah, we do spend some time on in other parts of our organization, but not necessarily here in Illinois at this point in time.
Thanks, Max. Any other questions out there for Max Webster? You can come off mute and ask, or write it in the chat. So Max, any other current updates on the legislative side? I know we talked about the Black Farmers for Restoration Act. I saw that was referred to assignments, and I'm not sure about the next step for that. Any other updates that we should be aware of?
Well, so the legislature is set to end on April 8th at this point. So just about a month to move all of this stuff forward. So the policy proposals that I talked about earlier, all of that is up against deadlines at this point to try to get that stuff passed and moved along, or else it's done for the year and we got to come back again next time and try it out. So a lot of the focus over the next month or so will be on trying to move that work forward as much as possible. Some stuff just won't be able to make it just because of the time crunch. But the really, really crucial and important part is the budget. And so the negotiations over the budget are just now kicking off and will go through the end of the legislative session. And so, reaching out to folks to not only say, let's get Soil Health Week over the line, let's get Partners for Nutrient Loss Reduction Act over the line, but hey, we really need funding and resources in the budget for this work. That's a really crucial part that folks can be thinking about leaning in and reaching out to their legislators on. So I really would say that those are kind of the priorities right now, is move the stuff that we can and then really dig in on the budget and try to get defend the money that's there and get a little bit more if possible to move this important work forward.
Great. And that is wonderful advice, Max, and take action on those action alerts. I know that there are several partners, AFT included, that have action alerts on websites. So make those calls while you can. We still have time. I know session's ending early, but there's still plenty of time to make sure your voice is heard. And there's one question, and maybe this is on AFT's website, or this might be something, I see Stacy Zuber's still with us. If anyone is able to chime in and point to resources, Ron asked, in Illinois, if we know how many acres are both no-till and cover crops, also no-till but not in cover crops, and cover crops but not in no-till. Do we know of any good resources to point Ron to, or if someone actually knows that, and can shout it out?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Ron. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of resources that sort of stack practices to look at where those are happening on the same acres. And I can't necessarily think off the top of my head, but I see Chris is here as well. Maybe Chris has some idea about where to find some of that stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Happy to kind of chime in. I don't think there's a lot of resources that show percentage of those stack practices. We can look at Transect survey data that the conservation districts do. We know, I think the latest would be somewhere around 35% of the soybeans in Illinois are no-tilled, somewhere around 10 to 12% of the corn is no-tilled. And I would say in general, these are just my numbers, that the percentage of cover crop users that are no-tilling is also very high. So, typically when farmers are utilizing cover crops, they're also no-tilling with that system. So I don't want to give a percentage there, but I would say that it's fairly high that is taking place. You still have some tillage or reduced tillage that's going on maybe in the spring, but my experience has been that it's very little.
Thanks, Chris. Coming to the rescue out in the Zoom world. Much appreciated. And yeah, Ron is with, I believe, Save the Earth, if I have the right Ron. So I know we can all continue to talk together, organization to organization, and try to find those numbers. But that was a great answer, Chris. Okay, Max, I think we are about at that time, and I really appreciate you taking the time with us today and sharing all of the great things happening, the actions that we can take. I think that there's just a lot happening, and we need to make sure that we are raising our voices in order to get what we need here and make sure that farmers have the tools that they need to keep building soil health. So thank you for laying it all out there, and looking forward to continuing to work with American Farmland Trust.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. And I'll just put one more plug out there as well, that the Farm Bill renewal is coming up in this year as well. So if you have any questions, concerns related to Farm Bill, please feel free to reach out to us at American Farmland Trust, the folks at Illinois Stewardship Alliance, or any other farm advocacy group that you participate in, so that they're hearing your voices and that we can get that information up to Congress. So thanks everybody for listening to me, and feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you, Max. And we'll continue to update everyone, in our newsletter too. But there are some great opportunities coming up for Farm Bill listening sessions, like Max said, later this month and over the